Well, I ran for this office because we need a change. We need someone that will actually go to Congress, represent the persons that elected them in the 3rd District of Nebraska, and not a political action committee, and not a national party, but the folks that sent them. And I firmly believe that we have to be very careful with our budget. We can't spend too much money. We can't overspend. We can't just keep raising. We can't cut taxes rapidly until, or we can't spend more until we get the deficit taken care of. It's trying to grow back together. We're struggling with a recovery, and I want to be the kind of person that goes out there and shakes hands with Tom Brewer or the other guy across the aisle and says, we're going to get this done. The heck with party politics. We're going to get this done. That's why I'm running.
We're going to focus on the topic of the economy, which both of you brought up a little bit in your statements about why you are running for Nebraska's 3rd District. In talking with both of you in the past, I believe, and correct me if I'm inaccurate, but you both seem to be in favor of doing what we do here at the state of Nebraska, and that's balancing a budget, balancing the national budget. What steps do you plan to take, if elected to Congress, to work on making a balanced budget a reality? And we'll start with you, Mr. Sullivan.
Quite honestly, the right thing to do is, in very measured, careful steps, cautiously cut spending, not with a meat axe, with a tweezer, with a surgical knife. Don't cut taxes until such time. I hate taxes. I'll admit it right now. Don't cut taxes until we get this deficit closed. We can do it. It's actually closing as we speak, but we must continue to be cautious, careful. We made a great deal of cuts were made in the last budget agreement, and they're helping. They're not perfect. They're kind of messy, but we need to do that. We need to make small cuts on a lot of things, and we need to be very, very wise in our taxing policy, so we can raise enough revenue to eventually close the gap. It's not going to be this year, but 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to be back where we were in 2000 with not a budget deficit. And won't that be great?
Well, I guess I'm a little bit different in my view on that one. I'm more of the meat cleaver type of guy. I like to refer to it as Fedzilla. It's this monster that we have of federal government, which has grown out of control. I mean, there's no way to look at it and not come to that realization. And if we don't drastically shrink our government and get it to where it's just doing those basic functions that the Constitution requires it to do, we will continue to see an economy that's stagnant because it can't grow because the government itself is what's preventing it from being able to expand. Like I told him out in Scottsbluff, I'm not a real big fan of taxes. I don't like them at all. But I even dislike our system right now of how we tax even worse, because the lobbyists have shaped it to benefit certain people and punish others. I have looked at both the fair tax and the flat tax. I think either of those would be better than what we have now, because we have to come up with a system where there isn't all of these avenues for people to get out of paying their fair share, and to stop bleeding the ones who work a normal job and get a normal wage from having to be, taken to the cleaners every time that they have to pay their taxes each year. So it's the combination of reducing government, and I'm not opposed to wholesale cutting federal agencies if that's necessary. So that's, I guess, more the meat cleaver approach to some of this. But if we don't take action on that, the economy's never going to come back, and people need to keep their money instead of sending so much to the federal government. That's why we have a stagnant economy right now.
And I should let you both know if at any time you would like to further your comments, if you went first and heard the comments from second, and you want to kind of maybe further elaborate on your comments, you're more than welcome to have a minute or two to either explain one of your answers or rebuttal with one of what your candidate said. So you're more than welcome to do that if you choose to do so. But we'll move on to the next topic, and these are numbers from the Wall Street Journal. The national unemployment rate has fallen to 6.7% from the peak of 10% at the height of the recession. But at the same time, the Wall Street Journal quotes that only 63% of Americans 16 or older are participating in the labor force. Are there structural issues that we need to tackle in the U.S. economy? And we'll start with you, Colonel Brewer.
We have failed to do the easy stuff when it comes to employment. I think we're setting on a gold mine of opportunity that we have totally ignored or avoided, and that's our energy reserves. I see no reason why we don't push forward with fracking. If you look at the oil reserves in the Bakken fields, they're saying that they're as great as Saudi Arabia. But we're not doing anything to really take that capacity and utilize it. Along with natural gas, which we have tremendous reserves of. We're looking at now the opportunity to sell that internationally because we have so much of it. We need to cease and desist with the purchasing of foreign oil in the Middle East. Why help them if we have it in our own fields around the country? And we're not doing that. And again, the pipeline is going to be part of that. We got to get it to the refineries. In a perfect world, we'd build a refinery in North Dakota and refine it right there and take it straight to the gas stations. But the part that's preventing us from doing that is government regulations. The EPA seems to have a chokehold on our economy and on our ability to do what's right. So those are the issues I see right offhand we could do to boost the economy and get things back in motion. And nothing against the Wall Street Journal, but I think I would put into question that 6.7. I think that real number is probably closer to 20% that are not gainfully employed doing the things we need people to do. And that's a continual drain on our economy too, because they're the ones who are utilizing those benefits that the others are paying for.
Well, I kind of tend to disagree on some of this, which is not surprising. I believe the best way to build jobs is to build our nation, build infrastructure. We need railroads, we need highways, we need an electrical power grid that's next to none instead of shaky. We need broadband service in the 3rd District in Nebraska because we don't have very good service in the 3rd District in Nebraska. Those jobs, that spending, whether it comes from private enterprise or through the government working with private enterprise, those are the kind of jobs, that's the kind of employment that the money is spent out of our cash flow, but it goes right over here in our savings account. And that's how you build wealth, and that's how you build a nation. And that is how you get jobs. The pipelines are pipelines, oil is oil. We need, and we're gonna, in our lifetimes, we're gonna rely on fossil fuels. But there's no point in us rushing out to squeeze out every drop of oil out of the ground and burn every chunk of coal as quickly as we can for profit when we're robbing our kids and our grandkids of energy. We need to start now. We need to use our fossil fuels carefully, conservatively. Conservative doesn't mean wasteful. Conservative means conserve. We need to use those fuels carefully and do a good job of those, and we need to start working today on renewables. We have got a good start with the ethanol industry, and we can keep going with solar, wind, and folks, there are where the new jobs are, the jobs for our grandkids and our kids, not for Tom and I, for those young ones. That's what I think.
Reflecting back to President Barack Obama's State of the Union address, he had said, "We need to give America a raise. It's time to give America a raise." Do you support raising the minimum wage? And we'll start with you, Mr. Sullivan.
Indeed, I do. I don't know that we have to go to $10 in Nebraska. I wish we could, but you know, our cost of living is quite a bit cheaper than other places. I hate the term working poor. If somebody's working 40 hours a week, or 50 or 60 or 2 jobs, they should never be poor in this country. So that's what I think of that.
I guess, again, I'm on the other side of things there. I honestly believe that you really let the fair market determine those things, because to compare Curtis, Nebraska with Boston, Massachusetts and say everybody needs the same wage, I just think is unrealistic. I think what you're going to do is put businessmen in an awkward position of not being able to have that workforce they need, because they're going to be restricted by a forced change in that factor they use to determine what someone's paid. So my view on that is it should be up to a fair market for the location that is happy to employ people.
Here in Nebraska, over the past 3 legislative sessions, and maybe more that I was not covering, Nebraska lawmakers have and are still working on reforming the tax code and providing tax relief for citizens. Where do you stand on tax relief, and how can we further the tax code, further reform the tax code at the federal level? We'll start with you, Mr. Brewer.
Well, I kind of dabbled into that. I've sat through some incredibly painful sessions with both the fair tax and the flat tax, because the guys that are rabid with these different ideas, they don't want you to just get a Reader's Digest version. They want to give you the whole encyclopedia, and sometimes it kind of makes your head spin a little bit. But to a degree, you need your head spinning, and you need to fully understand it, because when you embrace something, you're going to have to live with it. So, you know, that's the caution when you look at these. But either of those have the ability to get rid of our current tax system. You know, I've heard all kinds of numbers on how many, you know, tens of thousands of pages of regulations with the tax codes, and it just seems so ridiculous that we have this burdensome monster that's eating away at us. I believe that if we go to a simplistic system, that's how we get rid of the current unfairness that we have in our tax code system.
Well, I kind of agree with Tom in a way on that. It'd be great to simplify the tax code. There's a lot of loopholes, way too many loopholes. But quite frankly, every proposal I've seen to flatten the tax, to fair it up, has basically been a tax cut for corporations and wealthy people, and it's pushed it right back on working people like myself. And that would be my criticism. I think it's a good idea if it's not in the disguise or the guise of a tax cut for wealthy. And right now, I hate to say it, but we don't. My banker would kill me if I was going to cut my revenue and not when I had a deficit. He'd say, you got to get this together first. And right now, that's what I think we need to do.
We're going to switch topics here a little bit. We're going to dive into healthcare discussion and talk maybe just a little bit about the Affordable Care Act. Polling data, I don't have the polls right in front of me, but talking maybe just a little bit about the law. Republicans have constantly been trying to amend and repeal the law. Are there any alternatives, or are any of their alternative plans viable? And how do you see that we can probably make this law better in Washington, D.C.? And we'll start with you, Mr. Brewer.